Finding ways to be financially savvy is a smart move. And knowing you could be saving money for the things you really want, like that dream home or new ride, is a great feeling. That's why the State Farm Personal Price Plan can help you save when you choose to bundle home and auto. Bundling, just another way to save with the Personal Price Plan. Prices are based on rating plans that vary by state. Coverage options are selected by the customer. Availability, amount of discounts and savings, and eligibility vary by state. Do you keep hearing podcast ads, like this one, for example, but always wonder how you actually get involved with them for your own brand or organization? Well, it's easier than you think. We're Acast, and we give you the platform to do it all yourself. Browse thousands of popular podcasts, choose the shows that match your perfect audience, set your budget, and launch. And if you want a hand, our podcast specialists are there to help you launch with confidence. This is podcast advertising without barriers. Get started at acast.com/advertise.
Oh, no.
I was walking home last night.
Oh, yeah.
Down this park really close to my house and past a bin. And literally, I saw these two paws go over the edge of the bin and out popped a fox.
Oh, wow. What? The fox was inside the bin?
Yeah, and then it was licking its lips.
Wow. Diva.
You're listening to The Logbooks.
These are the stories of our lives.
We are Tash Walker
and Adam Zmith.
We're telling tales about history, politics, art, and LGBTQ+ life.
Tash, had any interesting train rides recently?
Oh, funny you ask, Adam. Yes, I was on the Overground to my house, which runs down Hackney Way, and I was looking out of the window and I saw two people enjoying themselves in the middle of the day, and one of them didn't have any pants on.
Okay, amazing.
It was going over the Hackney Marsh. No, it's actually higher than Hackney Marshes. It's like the Walthamstow, Leighton Marshes section. Yeah. And I know that there's a cruising ground around there.
Yeah.
But this was about 3 or 4 p.m. in the afternoon. I was surrounded by middle-aged to aging men and young children. And I just looked out the window and there I saw two people going for it. And actually, I was kind of into it. It made me smile.
Nice. I mean, the Hackney Marshes and around there in Walthamstow has known cruising spots. I heard recently that something happened last week where there's a bit where basically it's pretty obstructed. You can just go. It's quite discreet.
Yeah, totally.
Where people go and have sex. And but last week some teenage boys called the police on some of the men that were having sex there. And the police came and basically asked what was going on and everything like that. And they said that they didn't even know that was a cruising spot, but I don't know if that's true because it can't be, but because it's pretty well known. But also it's it's one of those things where you're if you don't want to see it, then don't go there and don't look at it.
Yeah, totally. So, I mean, I've also been known to roll around in those marshes.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, that makes me think we should have a little ad break.
Finding ways to be financially savvy is a smart move. And knowing you could be saving money for the things you really want, like that dream home or new ride, is a great feeling. That's why the State Farm Personal Price Plan can help you save when you choose to bundle home and auto. Bundling, just another way to save with the Personal Price Plan. Prices are based on rating plans that vary by state. Coverage options are selected by the customer. Availability, amount of discounts and savings, and eligibility vary by state. You've got social dialed in. Search is doing its thing. So why do your marketing results look the same as 6 months ago? That's because you're fishing in the same pond as everyone else. Podcast listeners are a different audience entirely. More engaged, harder to reach through traditional channels, and ready to act when someone they trust makes a recommendation. We're Acast, and we put them right in front of you. Browse thousands of the world's leading podcasts, book host reads or run your own ads, and track every conversion in real time. Same skills you already have, brand new results. Acast. Acast.com/advertise.
Tash, what have we got in this week's Messy Middle? Because it's over to you, and I don't really know what you're going to talk about or what you're bringing. So what is it?
Okay, so there's no hiding that I have a bit of a roller coaster ride with my brain and my mind, and sometimes I feel great and sometimes I really don't. And it's hard to know which way it's going to go. And I do a lot of things in my life to help me manage my mental health. And one of the things that really calms me is nature.
Okay.
So I feel very drawn to nature. I grew up by the sea like you did. I feel very drawn to the sea. I feel very drawn to water. I swim in my local reservoir, which is just wonderful. But all of these things took me to a book which is called The Well-Gardened Mind.
Okay, and you've got a copy there.
I've got a copy here. The Well-Gardened Mind, The Restorative Power of Nature. And it's by Sue Stuart Smith. And it's an amazing book. It's really, really interesting. And it covers lots of different thoughts around, and case studies around people with different kinds of mental health issues, all the way to psychosis through to just it feels nice to go for a walk in the grass.
Okay.
And I dive into this book occasionally. And I was reading it the other day and I came across this really interesting experiment about lab rats.
Oh, so that's what we're talking about. Lab rats.
Yes, that's
lab
our
rats.
long introduction
Okay.
to tell you
Okay.
that I want to tell you about lab rats.
Lab
So
rats. What is it about lab rats?
Wow, okay. So you know that the rat has a really similar sort of neural pathway to humans. So that's why there's lots of experiments on rats. The ethics around that are really complicated, and, you know, experimentation on animals is a whole nother topic. And I won't go into that today. But in this book, I read a report about an experiment on lab rats, and it was given in the context of how a human's environment can impact their mental health. So we were looking at a story of someone called Francis who had psychosis. He was diagnosed with schizophrenia and then started to work in a garden, like a local garden. And through this, he was studied by some of the people who were looking after him. And he started to feel like he could deal with and hold life a lot more after working in this garden.
Okay.
He said, and it was I found it quite an astonishing quote, it sort of stuck with me, "I am more aware of life now out of the shock of it." So through pruning and caring for plant life, which dies and comes back and doesn't come back and you have to care for it, he was able to hold the complexities of this world. And they draw on this experiment and they look at the reasons for that through these lab rats. So there's this experiment that happened where, and just for context, all of these experiments happened on lab rats. So these are rats that were born into the lab. They have never been outside of they're decades, generations of rats bred from rats, all within the laboratory.
Oh,
so
I imagine some talking and being like, "Oh, my grandfather used to say like the labs in the olden days were a lot, a lot worse conditions than what we have now."
Should have seen the lights back then. Yeah, totally. So they did this experiment on these rats where so when you do an experiment, you have sort of a control group, and the control group was some rats in a cage with just some water. Then they did a second experimental group where they put slides and a paddling pool into the cage.
Hang on a minute. Hold your horses.
Yeah.
Slides and a paddling pool for rats. So do they climb up a little ladder and go down the slide and into the pool?
Totally. It's effectively changing the environment of the rats.
Do they know that that's fun for the rats?
So they have done tests before where they see that rats have like to interact with things in their environment.
Right.
And so it's about like stimulus and stimuli, right?
Okay.
And so by putting water and a slide, it's creating a different thing for the rat to interact with.
Okay.
So it's changing their environment.
Okay.
So an equivalent of that for humans, I don't know, it would be like someone who's maybe has been sectioned and then putting someone who is in a hospital but has access to a garden or something. And then the third version of the rats, and they did this, this wasn't part of the original experiment. The original experiment was just to look at the control group and then the group with the slides. And it's so silly. And then but they were like, well, let's just try another one. And in the third cage, the second experiment group, they put twigs and soil within this cage. And then they started to record the impact of the rats. So the rats in the control group who've just got water and nothing else seem quite standard, not really showing much interest. The second group are becoming a bit more playful and interest. They've got more interactions with each other. But then the third group, with the twigs and soil, the rats here were the most quote unquote happy rats. Their neural pathways were responding really well. They were digging, they were interacting with each other, they were showing so much more instinctual responses, despite the fact that they've never been anywhere with twigs and soil before, because of course they're grown up in the
But that
lab.
is what that would be their natural environment.
Well, absolutely.
They're not going to have water slides in their normal environment, are they?
No, true. But then this is interesting, right? Okay, so let's take a step back and then think about what's happening here. And so you've got a rat that is being immersed within nature, or a form of nature, controlled nature, within a laboratory, expressing bigger signs of dopamine, which is a happy, quote unquote, chemical of our brain, which is showing, and then also the slides in the pool is showing a higher increased amount of dopamine than the control rat. And so it's the experiment effectively showed the importance and the impact of your environment on your mental health, which is what they used as a direct comparison to Francis, this individual who had psychosis, being immersed within a garden environment and working within that garden, starting to feel calmed by the environment around him. It seems like quite a basic experiment, but it's really interesting to see that those, and then we think about how we live in cities, which are maybe like the slides and the pool version, and we don't live in countryside, or lots of people don't, and we don't have access to forests and the sea and all of these things, and just thinking about the different impacts of our environment on us and on our mental health. And so I was obsessed with this idea. I thought it was really interesting, not so much about the experiment, because in my mind, nature just soothes me so much. I know directly the impact that it can have on me. But I was fascinated by the fact that these lab rats that had never been outside of the lab had this instinctual response to twigs and soil.
Yeah, I mean, it makes you think, doesn't it, about like what you were saying about if you grow up, whatever kind of environment that you grow up in, and that can be like a physical environment, like if you're a city kid, for example, or it can be a sort of emotional environment, like whatever the atmosphere was like between your parents at home, for example, and how like that's your kind of default situation, and then actually changing that environment, changing that, removing yourself from that, going to something else, and whether that has a good effect or a bad effect. I think that's one kind of piece, the changing the environment piece. But then there's also something else going on there, which is specifically about nature, and about like rats are part of nature. You know, their normal thing would be to live among soil and twigs. And I don't know what our normal thing as humans would be. Maybe also soil and twigs.
I think
because,
it is,
you know, cities are only like 200 years old or something.
Yeah.
Well, 2,000, depending on which civilization you use. But, these are human things that we've created, and in a way that they try and control nature. But that's where we've come from, really.
Totally. And then I took another step into this idea of the lab rats and started to think, as I find it really hard not to relate everything to queerness, obviously. And I took another step into this, and I started to sit with the idea that the person who was running the test, the experiment, how they were so excited to see this change on these lab rats, but of course they weren't free. The rats will never be free, and they could never really test or experiment on a free rat, because it would mean leaving the lab. And then it started to make me think about how we live in a world which can feel like a cage or a lab. And I then start to delve into this idea around my identity and being a queer person. And for me, what it means to be queer is to live alternatively, or to have an identity which is outside of the mainstream of what we would call like our cis, heterosexual, normative, all of these things, the words that are used to describe 2.4 families. And so a lot of my queerness comes as an opposition to everything that suppresses me. And so if I think about myself as queer, that's to do with my sexuality, my gender identity, but also my politics. And it means I am resisting something. I'm resisting the lab, or this world, which is my lab. Stay with me on this one. And And within that resistance, I start to think, okay, this is really interesting, because in order to feel the benefit of nature and the freedom that comes with that, it means escaping this world. But that also means that my identity is in opposition to everything that's around me. So then I take a step back and think, wow, who would I be without all of these things that oppress me?
Yeah.
And so then my brain starts to spiral around that thought. And so I end up writing a poem.
Oh, okay. Well, hang on a minute. We'll get to the poem.
Yeah.
I want to hear about the poem. But just to go back to the rat, comparing you with the rats, the thing that's making me think about is like, I want to know the difference between the rats. If you did catch wild rats and you looked at their dopamine levels. Dopamine, is that the reward? The reward one? So it's like when you do something where you get a benefit from it, and then it releases that hormone. So it's it doesn't make you happy, but it has a feeling of happiness because you've been rewarded with something.
And it reduces cortisol.
Which is stress.
Yes.
It's the opposite of stress, yeah. Okay, so like if you capture some wild rats, look at their dopamine when they're just like playing around in the twigs and the soil in nature. Look at their dopamine levels, their stress levels, and look at the stress and dopamine levels of the lab ones with the soil and the thing. It'd be interesting to know like what's the difference there, because also I wonder whether the lab ones know that there's no fox which is ever going to come and kill them, whereas the wild ones absolutely know that there's a fox around the corner. So that's interesting. That was what it made me think of. But in your example, it's that thing of like, well, like you said, like the rats aren't aware that they're in captivity, right? In a kind of like rational sense, they might know that and understand that in a sort of like physiologically impulsive sense. They might kind of like deep down somehow their bodies might know instinctively that this isn't a right situation. And that's why when they get the soil and the twigs, they're like, this is really nice. But yeah, you're kind of like using it as a metaphor for understanding yourself in the way that we construct a world around us, and that feels to you like captivity, but that you wouldn't know the freedom otherwise if you hadn't had the captivity.
Yeah, totally. Exactly. And I don't know, therefore, who I would be.
Yeah,
without,
if you were free.
If I was
free. From the beginning, born free.
If I was born free, exactly. And I think I find this so interesting because so much of my identity and yours as well, as you know, as queer people, is in resistance to feeling oppressed or feeling not othered in some way. And so I'm constantly always thinking about that push and pull dialogue. And more so as I've got older and more reflective is to try not to resist it so much and to lean into it. This is who I am, and I am only now what I can be. And I am a result of everything I've lived and also the world around me. But I think it's really interesting because it ends up living in this sort of state in my mind where you kind of always will be caged. And I think I haven't decided where I've ended up there. I haven't decided what my thoughts are on that properly, ultimately yet. But I like this idea of my environment allowing me to feel more free, but it means leaning into the fact that I'm accepting that I'm within a cage.
Yeah, I think it's true. Like we all have to know that on some level. Like I think, you know, you want to try and, if you're raising a child, for example, which neither of us are doing, like if you're raising a child, then you want to create a sort of born free experience for them. But then also it's just not possible because they have to know that the fire is hot and they can't touch it. And sometimes you've told them that 100 times, but if they put their hand there, you have to like basically say like absolutely no, like be really firm, and that feels like a cage because you're stopping them doing something. So you have to teach them those things, and then also like even if it's not about like avoiding danger like that, but just in general, whatever, you're not making a neutral environment for that child. Like you're influencing them by who you are, how you behave, how you talk. Even if you think you're doing the most benign version, even if you think you're only giving them organic, healthy food, whatever it is. That that also could be its own captivity for some people. Give me a turkey dinosaur. But like the fact is, like I just think it's easy for us to say because we're talking in the abstract. It's easy for me to say, but like I think we're trying to like optimize like so much for that like like benign environment freedom, and actually what we're not paying enough attention to is the fact that like that's kind of a fool's game. Like you can do that, but like you absolutely should try and create a nice environment for you and people around you. Why not? But on some level, like you need to deal with the reality of life, and you need to know what's dangerous, and you need to also know that like some people hate you and some people whatever, like there are forces around that are going to try and control you and everything like that. And like I said, it's easy to say in the abstract because we're talking about it now.
Yeah, definitely. I think all of those things are true. I think for me, with the way that my brain works, there's been a piece that has come with accepting that I am a product of all of these things.
Yeah.
And not trying to resist against it, because the resistance is so tiring. I am born out of resistance. I acknowledge that my existence is a resistance to this state and society, and I'm okay with that, and I actually love it. I love my queerness. It's like my favourite part of me, but I have accepted that. And I think a lot of that acceptance has come out through emotional roller coasters, my brain going left, right and centre, feeling overwhelmed, but then turning to nature, and be that, the reservoir that I swim in, which is in the middle of London, or to going away and diving into the sea, or going for a walk in the woods. It does really help me, and there's a peace in that. So I think I'm just sort of fascinated with the way in which our environments can change how we're feeling. And then it makes me think as well that another sort of bigger metaphor for this could be like the whole self-help, well-being industry. And I started to think about these rats in the cage with the twigs and soil, and then how our capitalist world would monetize that by selling and bottling twigs and soil. And
what if we were rats, you mean?
Yeah, well, because I also, to add to the rat thing, sometimes when my brain starts to play tricks on me, it feels like I've got a rat in my head, like gnawing on my thoughts, or like sort of being unkind to me. It's like an unhelpful voice. And so I started to like this idea of the twigs and soil being bottled up and sold, and then like me stuffing the twigs and soil into my ears for the rat to like help. And that's, ultimately like a self-help thing, I think.
I do think it is so wild that like we take water out of the ground, we put it in a plastic bottle, we put it on a truck, then we put it in a shop, and then we ask people to pay £2 for that. And water is obviously like the most basic offer from nature and requirement of our bodies, and yet it's somehow become a thing that we put in bottles and truck it around. And then also, even when it comes through the pipes into our houses, we're paying for that.
Yeah, totally.
And it is that, but it's just something that naturally comes from the ground, and it's something that we need. It's just so interesting. And, it makes me think of like those, you can buy like, you can go into a shop and buy a mango, or you can also go into a shop and buy a plastic pot.
I knew you were going to say that.
Of like mango that's been cut up. And like pound for pound, you're paying like 3 times over for the one that's cut up and put in plastic. And there's obviously a whole other point here about like how much plastic crap we're creating, and it's just going into landfill, and it's going into our bodies and all that climate rubbish. But like, also it's just like, but it already had its own packaging.
Yeah.
Like a mango comes
like a banana.
And an orange. They come in their own packaging.
Yeah.
It's
just a reliance, isn't it? It's a reliance. Somewhere there's been a change, and we could. This is a whole probably series of conversations around the point where things started to change around products and selling to ourselves, and the idea of consumerism and capitalism, and what has got us to where we are today. But the thing that I think I really like that point that you're making, and the thing that I think is so interesting is how little we question it now, because it is just every day. It's not shocking, but it's so, when you break it down like that, it's outrageous. It's wild. The fruit has its own packaging is such a great way to explain it, and you just think about it like that. It makes you. So then, it's almost too big sometimes to hold in your head, isn't it? Because how do you keep moving through the world when you start seeing things in this way. And I can get a bit existential around all of these things, and a way that the way that helps me is to write poems about it.
Okay, so you wrote a poem about the lab rats.
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what was the process for writing that?
So after reading this book and basically what I've just explained to you today, what we've just spoken about, I'm like, can't stop thinking about it. So I just I can't stop thinking about the rats. I can't stop thinking about this idea. I can't stop thinking about how it relates to me, to the world. And so I just usually write a splurge is what I call it. So I just be walking around lots, thinking about things, writing in my notes on my phone, and then I'll get home and I'll just like write, and it will all just come out, and out of that comes lines, and sometimes like I could just write something and that is like a whole verse. And yeah, usually I get it down onto paper. And with this one, there was a real rhythm to it, which I think is important to recognise, is like this idea of gnawing, the rat gnawing in the lab rat. So it's got like a real natural rhythm and you can hear it. And then the thing I was playing with, and I'm still playing with this poem, is the form that it takes, because I wanted to have the poem do something that breaks the form. And so originally I started to try and write it in a lab form, like a lab report form, but that was quite hard because lab reports are really like structured, and this felt like it was exploding out of the structure. So then the iteration which I showed you, Adam, is effectively a cage, but it could also be a table. So it's got like 3 columns, then a line, and then 3 columns, and there's writing in all of them. And so what I want to do now is sort of work on this poem so that it could be read in multiple different ways, no matter how you come to it, but also maybe have the same words in 3 different formats, and the cage being the final one, with this realisation that we're all in this cage society.
Okay.
So I'm sort of bringing it to you as I'm playing with it. But I find it a really therapeutic way to sort of deal with whatever I've got niggling at my head. And it really helps me to work through how I feel about things. So, yeah, I mean, people often say this, don't they, with like art and writing, that there's a catharsis to it. But I definitely feel that.
Well, I'm really looking forward to seeing and hearing the final version of this poem with these lab rats. So, well, thanks. I feel like I've learned a bit more about you, Tash, in this chat, and also a bit more about lab rats than what I knew already.
I've got my tattoo as well, Adam.
Of a rat. Oh, yeah. It's great. Yeah. Lovely.
Little rat.
That's great. So what are you up to next, Tash? What's going on?
I'm thinking about getting a rat. No,
Okay,
I'm joking.
amazing.
I'm joking.
My friend's got 3 rats, actually,
Oh.
and they're really cute, and some of them are enormous.
Okay. Actually, something that is happening soon, in a couple of weeks, on the 23rd of May, is that I will be at Queer Brewing in Walthamstow. I always find it hard to say brewing.
Brewing.
I have a problem with my R's.
Queer Brewing.
Brewing.
And
I'm going to be chairing a conversation between the 2 amazing writers and friends of ours, Ellen Jones, who wrote Outrage, and Elizabeth Lovett, who wrote Thank You for Calling the Lesbian Line.
Oh, what's the topic about?
It's going to be their books in conversation with Tash, helping them stay on track.
Okay, and beer, presumably.
And Queer Brewing,
Lots of
yeah.
beer, yeah.
So much delicious beer. It's in Walthamstow, 23rd of May. You can get tickets via the Queer Brewing website or via our link tree as well.
Lovely. And of course, you can listen to other Aunt Nell podcasts wherever you listen to podcasts, and subscribe to our Patreon. You can always also go back right to the beginning of the Logbooks podcast. Maybe you've been reading our book by now, which is called The Logbooks, and you might want to dip into the old episodes of the Logbooks when we were making these 3 documentary seasons using the archive that we first started on.
I know.
Very nostalgic. It's getting
so
further away in
nostalgic.
time. So, yeah. You can listen to that. But thanks very much, Tash, for bringing this episode about the lab rats and the
thanks for
Queer Brewing
listening.
event.
It's actually so helpful to talk through it with you today. I feel like I'm full of ideas for where I can take this next. So thank you for listening, Adam.
Lovely. The Logbooks is an Aunt Nell production.
It is hosted and produced by Tash Walker and Adam Zmith.
The assistant producer is Mia Campbell. Music from Soundstripe,
Original artwork by Natalie Doto.
with thanks to the dreamboats at Acast.
Finding ways to be financially savvy is a smart move. And knowing you could be saving money for the things you really want, like that dream home or new ride, is a great feeling. That's why the State Farm Personal Price Plan can help you save when you choose to bundle home and auto. Bundling, just another way to save with the Personal Price Plan. Prices are based on rating plans that vary by state. Coverage options are selected by the customer. Availability, amount of discounts and savings, and eligibility vary by state. Do you keep hearing podcast ads, like this one, for example, but always wonder how you actually get involved with them for your own brand or organization? Well, it's easier than you think. We're Acast, and we give you the platform to do it all yourself. Browse thousands of popular podcasts, choose the shows that match your perfect audience, set your budget, and launch. And if you want a hand, our podcast specialists are there to help you launch with confidence. This is podcast advertising without barriers. Get started at acast.com/advertise.